begin our forum by reciting Al-Fatihah. Where I call upon some of you at the back benches, if you can fill up the empty chairs in front. I would like to welcome all the speakers, the panel, Prof. Dr.Chandra Muzaffar. The panel consists of Mr. Ahmad, Fayhsal Ahmad, Assistant Professor Dr. Syed Farid Al-Ahsan, Professor Dr. Abdullah Al-Ahsan, and Mr. Junaid Ahmad will be discussing at the end of the presentations with regard to the topic of the discussion. I would also like to request, there are some press at present today. I would like to request, this is the request by the panel, that if you want to, write something on the discussion today, would you like to refer back to the presenters, whether you want to quote them, whether it is right or not. I think this is something important because the subject matter is not controversial for some parties. Because it is indeed honored to organize this forum together with JUST, and we have tried our best to have a balanced panel, and we would like to apologize for a delay invitation because the invitation only, I think, came out sometimes maybe Monday or Tuesday, because we are hoping to have the ambassador herself of the Turkish embassy and some other respected scholars in this area, but they couldn't make it. Indeed, we are very grateful that this forum can take place. I would like also to pass regard from Prof. Kamani. He is on leave. And before we pass the discussion to the panel, I would like to call upon Prof. Dr. Chandra Muzaffar to give welcoming remarks representing JUST.
Dr. Azam, distinguished panelists, friends, Assalamu alaikum. For me, one of the most outstanding features of the 15th July event is the way in which hundreds of thousands of people came out in the open and defended democracy, their commitment to democracy, not to an individual per se. It was a commitment to democracy. And the parallel that I can think of as far as that particular aspect of the 15th July episode is concerned is what happened on the 11th of April, 2002 in Venezuela. You know, there was a coup in Venezuela, lasted 48 hours. It was interesting. Here, perhaps it was also 48 hours. The coup lasted 48 hours. It was engineered by vested interests in Venezuela against President Hugo Chavez. And for a while, people thought it had succeeded, including the New York Times, which wrote an editorial advertising the coup because they thought it had succeeded. So you see some of the same forces at work in the rest of it. But that coup failed, like the 15th July coup also failed, largely because of the people, the way in which people came out against Turkey. It's just amazing. There are differences, of course, which we won't go into, but this is something one has to keep in mind. what we would like to describe as people power. In trying to get rid of a coup, something illegitimate, restoring legitimacy, strengthening democracy. So the role of people in strengthening democracy, I think, is critical everywhere. And there are people who have realized this power, there are others who haven't, but this is something which I think elites will have to protect. There are many other implications from the 15 July episode in Turkey. Its implications for civilian rule, for democracy in Turkey. Has one gone beyond restoring democracy, fighting coup plotters? These are questions. Other things beginning to happen which could have implications for Turkey in the long run? Its impact upon the region as a whole, relations with other countries, crisis in Syria, relations with Russia, and what it means for the future, because Turkey is critical in the relations between East and West, relations between Russia and the United States of America, Turkey's role in NATO and how that may change in the future and what this means. These are vital questions. We don't have answers yet. It's still very, very early. And it's also important in terms of Islam and Muslim societies, given the role that Turkey has always played in shaping Muslim history. Let's reflect on all these issues. I'm sure many of these things will be talked about, the questions and the answers from the panel. Like you, I'm looking forward to a very interesting exchange. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chandra, for that interesting remarks. I need to make an announcement since we have an overwhelming response from participants, because those registered, we rely only on registered, but we have this overwhelmed participants and guests. We may take a quick about 10 minutes break. We have to move to upstairs to accommodate our friends outside there. Otherwise, it's going to be suddenly cramp here. If you don't mind,
for certain, this is not a coup. We are safe, inshallah. Ladies and gentlemen, the failed coup attempt in Turkey on 15 July 2016 was perhaps the most significant event in the social and political life of the country in modern times. It marks an historic milestone in the evolution of Turkish democracy and the sovereignty of the people over the nation and its institutions. Nevertheless, a deeper analysis of what the attempted coup and counter-coup signifies is required. What are both the internal dynamics of Turkish society that led up to 15 July and afterwards? And what are the larger geopolitics unfolding that provide a larger context? And centrally, how do these developments, specifically, and the Turkish model, more generally, speak to the matter of Islam and politics? This important forum will attempt to unpack these questions and address the larger implications for the Muslim world and beyond. Without further ado, I would like to call upon the first panel, Mr. Ahmad Fayhsal. I suppose you can read his profile, but certainly he is graduated from University of Technology Petronas in Syed Iskandar, in engineering, in particular in chemical, and formerly served as strategic planner, executive at Technology and Engineering Division of Petronas, and also had a brief stint at Prime Minister Department under Putra Agenda Steering Unit, what we call it Traju, and served as lecturer at International Islamic University College, Selangor, Kuwait. Without further ado, I pass the mic to you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah alladhi anzala rasulahu bil huda wa dinil haqq liyuzhirahu 'ala ad-din kullih wa kafa billahi shahida. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan 'abduhu wa rasuluhu. Allahumma salli 'ala sayyidina Muhammad wa 'ala ali sayyidina Muhammad. Qala rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon. First and foremost, I would like to say thank you to JUST-IAIS for inviting me. Second time actually, I was here before during the Royal Highness event, Raja Hazari Sofia. I was one of the panelists along with Professor Muzaffar of Azam. Way back in 5 years ago, I think. 5 years ago, yeah. Thank you, Prof. Azam, for inviting me for this particular forum. I would like to pay homage to Dr. Chandra Muzaffar. The last time I shared the same forum with him when I was still a freshie in UTP, which is 10 years ago. He was at Casuarina Hotel Ipoh. We were talking about globalization and Muslim world. So it was a very long time. And also to Professor Syed Al-Ahsan, I was very much influenced by his father's works, especially on decolonization. That really affected my studies in UTP as a chemical engineer, because it made me to question many of the assumptions in modern science with regard to my field as a chemical engineering student. So I ended up later on to study his uncle's work, mostly written by Sri Professor Syed Al-Ahsan, the renowned philosopher. And also Professor Al-Ahsan, I was with you in the National Youth Engagement Program, also with JUST, Dr. Chandra Muzaffar, way back in 2008, I think. So these are familiar faces that now I would consider as my teachers, who have shown me the path to intellectual wisdom. I thank you, all of you, for that. When this coup was exploded, I had written a brief view about my personal encounter with the Fatullah Gul and Hizmat Movement in my blog. It was shared by many viewers or readers. I wrote it in Malay. You can Google my name, inshallah, you can find my views in brief about what really happened in Turkey. It's just a hypothetical analysis. Yeah? Even today, we all know, as explained by Dr. Chandra just now, we are still waiting for more conclusive evidence to really understand what's really happening on the ground with respect to the Turkish coup. Nonetheless, I do have some unique experience with regard to Hizmet Fatullah Gulen. I'm not part of the Hizmet, of course, but I grew up in the campus in UTP with many of students who graduated from Gulen School in Central Asia. Because Petronas has many investments in Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, all the Central Asian countries, the Turkic nations. So most of these brilliant, bright young students who end up in UTP were actually from the Turkish schools of Fethullah Gulen, so-called. It's not really linked officially, but they all know it is a private international school being set up in those countries in Central Asia. So I grew up with these students myself. And after I graduated from UTP, I went to Turkey with these people to see myself how Turkey for the first time, how Turkey is for the first time, and also to personally meet some of the so-called brothers or the leaders of Hizmet in Istanbul, Bursa and Adil. These are three major cities. At the same time, learning the Ottoman history and Turkish history. So I would like to share some of these pictures, which I think would set some background with regard to my personal unique experience in knowing these people. When I went to Turkey in 2011, our party, led by President Erdogan, had just won a new mandate, 2011. And when I first arrived there, we were having our Fajr at the Ayub Sultan Mosque, where the Prophet Sahaba, Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, was buried. So this is the picture inside the mosque during Fajr, where you can see it's quite dark, but you can see there are many people. The Jama'ah, after the prayer, they went to the front and met President Erdogan. It was done in a very hush-hush manner, in the sense that it was not publicized like what we see in Turkey today. Back then, I was told, back then, 2011, the media, the public in Turkey would not accept to see their president associated with any Islamic related events, such as praying in the mosque. 2011, when our party just had won their new mandate. So the sentiment was different than today. The support was not openly declared yet by the people, because it was like a 50-50 situation between the secularists, the Kemalists, the nationalists, and also the Muslim, those who support President Erdogan as a Muslim leader. So it was a very big event in the sense that it's Fajr during working days. You can see the numbers of Turkish people went for congregation was quite large compared to us. So I had the chance to shook hands with President Erdogan. He said, hello, where are you from? I said, I'm from Malaysia, I'm having a holiday here. Yeah, only that. But when I went outside after Fajr, he was surrounded by the Turkish people. They were really adoring him, as a charismatic leader. The ladies waiting outside the mosque just to have a look at President Erdogan. Yeah, that's me, and with the ladies. I went to many of the places which currently deemed restricted by the Turkish government before. Currently, these places like the hostels, the universities, the schools, which are deemed to own by the Hizmet movement. So I went there, I stayed there, I mixed with the students, with the teachers, with the lecturers, and for me they are wonderful people. It's very hard for me to conceive them as terrorists, as claimed by the Turkish media and government, because they have never preached any political messages to me, even though we all know in Turkey the spirit of trying to relive the Ottoman experience was very much alive among the people. But among the Hizmet, they don't talk about politics. So I went to this hostel, I think in Bursa, the schools. It's very modern, like any ordinary private international schools. Very well maintained, very well managed. Many students who studied there were sent by their parents who are not necessarily Islamically inclined. They are seculars, they are liberals, even they don't pray, but they want the best education for their children. Like it or not, they have to send to the Turkish schools run by the so-called Hizmet of Fayhsal Gulen. Even in Malaysia, we have few schools. They were sent, students who studied there are non-Muslim students. It's not a religious school, it's not a madrasa. It's just a private international school. And I also went and visited this media conglomerate purported to be aligned with Fayhsal Gulen's movement, like this national TV station called Saman Yolu. and also Zaman, the famous Turkish newspaper, now already been closed down. I couldn't even find the English website for this media because I think Erdogan banned. Because if you were to recall last year during the schism in Syria, there was a big news with regard to the scandal of President Erdogan and his son in laundering some money, caught by Turkish police, which they claim to be aligning with Fethullah Gulen or sympathizers with Fethullah Gulen's movement. So, because there were evidences of telephone recordings captured by the police, but it was, of course, at the end, the president Erdogan managed to stop the police from taking any actions against himself and the children. So I was there. It was very much professionally run newspaper. It's not a tabloid. It's not like our Harakah Daily. It's not like our Haran Metro. It's like Newsflix Times, professionally run by journalists, editors, and intellectuals. I also attended a humanitarian organization run by so-called Hizmet Gulen called Kimsiyah Yawmu. These are people who went to many places in the world, in Africa especially, in helping the Muslims and non-Muslims on humanitarian ground. So I went to Fatih University. This is one of the big university, private, run by Hizmet Gulen. That's me, Professor Al-Ahsan, and a few others. So this university, I'm not sure what is their fate currently. Closed down, I suppose, yeah. Most of the lecturers are being sacked, blacklisted. But when I was there, the Sulaiman Shah University, there are many universities run by so-called Hizmet Gulen. The schools, secondary schools, the radio station. So, judging from these pictures, and also my personal encounter with these people who are deemed to be called affiliated with Hizmet Gulen, I really could not figure out how could these people plan the perpetrated coup d'etat against the government, because Fethullah Gulen and his people have never preached violence as a means to reform society. Remember, Fethullah Gulen even went against or criticized the government of Turkey for the Mavi Marmaras incident. And even he himself, Fethullah Gulen, was part of the those who have been ostracized by the coup during the Erbakan's day, way back in the 90s. And when I visited the TV station, I saw a few posters on documentaries with regard to the so-called parallel state. This Ergenekon, or what we call in geopolitical language, the NATO's left behind army, the Gladio. These are the Kemalists, the secularists, who want to safeguard Turkish Kemalism. So they oppose everyone who tried to challenge their national ethos as a secular and Kemalist country. So when I went to the TV station, I saw these documentaries. Fethullah Gulen's TV station even aired the documentary about the so-called parallel state. Back then, 2011, there was no such thing as accusation against Fethullah Gulen, but they were the parallel states. I was told by many of the Hizmet members, they personally went back from all parts of the world to vote in the airport, in the Istanbul airport, to vote to make sure our party won the election, which they won, of course. So this, in 2011, smooth sailing between two parties, the Hizmet and also the Ak party. Even the former Prime Minister, President Abdullah, he was so-called leading or close to Hizmet Fatullah Gulen, and he was accepted as Erdogan's number 2, or the president, sorry, back then. Erdogan was the Prime Minister, he was the President. So, what really happened? What was the turning point? The turning point was when Hizmet affiliated institutions like the media, the police, revealed the evidence of Erdogan's corruption. For me, it's not different than what we experience here. If you ask me personally, yeah, the political maneuvering, the institution bickering, because the Hizmet Fatullah Gulen, in the past, they claim this Hizmet as a parallel state because in the past, for a proper Muslim to be in the government of Turkey, you need not or cannot reveal your Islamicness. So you have to be very so-called clandestine. So-called, but you are not. You have to negotiate your way properly to be in the critical position and slowly conduct your reform within the government. So many of the so-called Hizmet people, one into the judiciary, one into the police, one into the army. Have we ever read anything about this when Erdogan was in power? I never recall any accusation as serious as this one today. So there must be something, and proven to be. I've read a book released by Fatullah Gulen, Time to Talk, an exclusive interview with Fatullah Gulen. It was released last year. In this book, he answered all accusations with regard to Hizmet that was lambasted by Erdogan and the government of Turkey. He answered everything. And one of the main chapter in this is about Gulen's criticism on Erdogan's demagoguery and also theft of public property. About the scandal involving President Erdogan and also his son. Remember how could ISIS sold their ill-gotten oil from Iraq, landed or transported to Ceyhan in Turkey's port before being siphoned to Israel, right? So there must be some coordination and involvement of government officers that opens the border for this to transpire, for the weapon and the money to flow, for the mujahideen to flow to travel to Iraq. They need to cross through Turkish border. So these are the accusations that the so-called Hizmet Fatullah Gulen put forth, which now they have paid the heavy price for revealing such truth. Yeah? If you ask me personally what's really happening on the ground, on the geopolitical level, my answer is simple. I think this is my hypothesis. Yeah? My hypothesis. Actually, in a bigger scale, my view is this. It was meant to weaken every major faction in Turkey. It was designed to weaken the army. It was designed to weaken the president. It was designed to weaken the Hizmet movement, all at one go, by pitting them against each other. Yeah. I do believe there are roles played by the secret service in feeding the Hizmet movement with this corruption evidence. Yeah, they captured the recordings, whatnot. Yeah, so being the regulators, Hizmet people acted according to the procedures. Yeah, and Coup, as we all know, Erdogan has been very much has been carrying this mantle of Ottomanism. He wants to revive somewhat the Ottoman role of Turkey in the region. So the military, which is run by mostly secular people, the Kemalists, of course, could not afford to see Turkey going that direction, you know, leaving the nationalist sentiment behind and widen the geopolitical reach of President Erdogan in the Muslim world. So, because most of Turkey generals are aligned to NATO, it is counter to their interests. And I believe the coup was designed to weaken the army because by weakening the army, Turkey is very much vulnerable. Let's say there would be clashes in Syria in coming months. Turkish military is not ready to act as the balancing factor in tempering the impact of terrorism in the region. Because most of the five-star generals, most of the high-ranking officers are now being sacked and being put into jail. So the army is in very low morale. Just imagine, you are being accused, lock, stock and barrel, as a traitor to the country. Whereas most of the soldiers are just obeying the orders commanded by their high-ranking officers. And at the same time, the coup is real. It's really want to kill President Erdogan. That's why when President Erdogan said in the media, it's like God's blessing, or God's gift to him for the coup to happen. Because it is the time, or he has a pretext to do what he has to do now. He has profiled all the academicians, all the schools, all the universities, all the journalists, all the police, all the judiciaries who he thinks related to Fethullah Gulen. How could he sack these people if the work of profiling these people have not been done prior to the coup? He was ready to roll out after the coup, as happened to be now. So this is my theory. It's just a theory, yeah? It could be correct, it could be wrong, but my guess is this. Turkey was meant to be weakened as a whole, because Hizmet is a very strong movement in Turkey. They are the most organized Nurjula movement, the Nur movement, or by the Zaman Sheikh Mursi. Among all Nur movement, they are the most organized. They have outreach all over the world. Although some people claim that Graham Fuller, the one who wrote the book about the world of Islam, he's a CIA operative, retired one, I think. He had helped Muslim Brotherhood in the past. So people said, this guy has been helping Fethullah Gulen getting his green card to stay in US, in Pennsylvania, nearby CIA's headquarters. But for me, there's no conclusive or concrete evidence to link CIA and Fethullah Gulen. He might be used by CIA actually, could be, yeah, hypothetically speaking, because of his non-political affiliation. It makes them more easy to work with. It could be that CIA sees the Hizmet as an alternative to current model of Islamic movement all over the world, which mostly be modeled according to Ikhwan Muslimin, the Muslim Brotherhood, which is more radical in nature. Yeah? So Hizmet does not involve in politics. That's why perhaps CIA very much see this as a good alternative to encourage the movement to flourish all over the world. Yeah. But talking about the future of Muslim politics, although it's too early to speak about it, but we can see the possible trajectory of the condition of the Muslim politics. I have presented a very long presentation in other places. I hope I can put this slide. Okay, it's okay, just show this slide without any presentation format. Why Syria breaks? It has something to do very much with what currently happening in Turkey. First, we have to understand the bigger picture of power politics, the region power politics. We must understand NATO's eastward expansion. We all know NATO has been expanding to the east. They have overthrown the legitimate regime or government of Ukraine that made Putin, President Putin of Russia, intervene directly into the politics. And also we, as Malaysians, bore the consequence of that political mess through the downing of our MH17. So, since NATO expanded to the east, you know, the superpowers, they think the world as their battleground. It's like their own chessboard. You hit me in Ukraine, I hit you where you are very much vulnerable. They want to overthrow Syria, President Al-Ahsan. So, without realizing that Russia would intervene in the future. So, America was very much surprised to see and to know Russia was already defending President Bashar from being overthrown by the ISIS and regime change movement. So this is actually a bigger geopolitical play at hand. And our Muslim countries are just part of the pawns on the grand chessboard, to quote Zbigniew Brzezinski's word. And we all know the crisis in Turkey is very much, well, I will go into this yet, is all about securing the pipeline to Europe. Originally, there was a plan to create what they call the Turkish Stream. Yeah? The Turkish Stream from Russia goes to Turkey and enters into the Bulgaria and reachable to the rest of Europe. Because originally the original stream was actually passing through Ukraine. Now Ukraine is very much a failed state. Russia's gas cannot be transferred to the European market. So they have to find another alternative way. One of the most important and also lucrative gas pipeline to connect Europe and Russia was through Turkey. They had this plan. It was abandoned after Erdogan shut down, well, the Turkish government shut down the Russian jet last year that created this rift between Russia and Turkey. President Erdogan and President Putin had planned various important strategic projects that would augment Russia's influence in Turkey or in the border to Europe. For example, I have written an article here last year before this whole crisis between Turkey and Russia occurred. New pipeline paving way for Eurasian integration. This pipeline is very important for both Russia and Turkey because Turkey can play important role as a strategic hub that will connect Europe and Asia for their energy needs. So Turkey that struggle between the East and West, with the help of Russia that has abundant of natural resources, especially the natural gas, they have committed an important cooperation. This deal was off the table last year because of the downing of the plane, but now after they amended their relationship recently when President Erdogan went to St. Petersburg to meet President Putin, they agreed to resume this project again. Not only the pipeline, also the most important energy project, the building of nuclear power plant in Aku, Turkey, fully paid by Russia's Rosatom, the nuclear energy agency. So you can see how Russia, when we talk about nuclear, it's all about not just about energy, it's about deterrent, geopolitical defense. The cheapest way to deter your enemy is to have a nuclear power plant. Having a nuclear power plant, say, nearby the Black Sea, do you think NATO would dare to attack Turkey? No way, no way. So that's why Russia really needs Turkey as much as Turkey needs Russia, because they have messed up with NATO due to the coup. So this is my personal view about current situation, and also the future trajectory will be more interesting because recently there has been a détente between Turkey, Russia and Iran. Iran was just being released by the US with regard to their sanction. Now they are trying to claim the market share for their oil and gas. That's why our oil prices is very much low, because the flooded of supply due to Iran was because Iran now can openly compete with Saudi as the largest producer in the Middle East. So in the future, the rivalry between Saudi and Iran will be more intense, not because of the Shiism or Wahhabism, nothing to do with that sort, but because of the energy politics. Each country wants to dominate the region, to become a so-called regional power, and to claim their market share. So that's why there's proxy war in Yemen, in Syria even, because of this. Because the pipeline that the European wants would come from Qatar, and pass through Syria and Saudi, before they can reach Europe. So this is the real bigger picture actually. As long as this cannot be resolved, we will forever see destabilization in the Middle East. They really, once Hillary so-called would be the president of the US next year, we will see more damages inflicted by the NATO against our Muslim countries, especially Syria. They will go all out to overthrow President Bashar al-Assad. Not because he's evil, because he blocks the pathway of Qatar gas to Europe, which would spell the end of Russian influence in Europe. So it's a big chessboard where both superpowers are vying for influence and also market share. Simple as that. Simple as that in the bigger picture. So with that, I thank you. Inshallah, we can continue in the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you very much. I know you have more things to say and to share with us, but as a moderator and chairman for this program, I have to be fair, as it is under my name, as Muhammad Azam Adil. Otherwise, I'm not doing justice. I don't want have to perform justice in such a way. But let me clarify with regard to the other panels that with regard to the timing. It stated the program that every speaker will be given 15 minutes, but more or less it's approximately 15 to 20 minutes. If you go more than that, I will give you a notice. I think we will leave Mr. Ahmad Fayhsal's points, and you may ask him later. Can I call upon Associate Professor Dr. Syed Farid to share his view? And I think you know him better. We no need to introduce him.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Can everyone hear me? So I'm going to make a few remarks about this topic. First of all, thank you very much to IAIS and JUST for the invitation. Now my remarks, I hope to take about 15 minutes. My remarks are divided into two. I want to say a few words about the coup, or rather about how we are talking about the coup, the attempted coup in Turkey. And secondly, I want to talk about the implications of the attempted coup, what has happened in the aftermath, what are the implications of that for the fight against Muslim extremism. So these are the two issues I want to discuss. Now, regarding the coup itself, or the attempted coup itself, now as everybody knows, Gulenists have been accused. Of course, the evidence is circumstantial up to now. But there are a few things that are interesting points that need to be made about the possible involvement of Gulenists in the coup. First of all, it has been widely circulated, but particularly after the attempted coup, but even before, it had been circulated that there is an organization called the Fayhsal terrorist organization. And after the attempted coup, the acronym FITO has become quite widespread in the media. Now, this is unlikely to be the case that there is an organization called the Fayhsal terrorist organization, because no terrorist organization calls itself a terrorist organization. Right? This is not to say, of course, that Gulenists or supporters of Fayhsal Gulen were not involved in a coup or did not instigate a coup, just as it is possible that a Shafi'i or a Hanafi or somebody belonging to a particular Sufi order may be involved in a coup or may support a coup, may be an instigator of a coup. But I don't think that we know of a particular organization that is a Gulenist organization that espouses terrorism or violence, in the same way that, for example, we know the Islamic State espouses violence. We know about Jama'at Islamiyah, we know about Al-Shabaab in Kenya, we know about Boko Haram. We know of terrorist organizations which actually espouse a particular ideology that has violent tendencies. We do not know about such an organization that is affiliated with Fayhsal Gulen. This is not to say that they are not involved, but we need, if one claims that there is an organization, one has to have evidence that there is such. One has to have evidence of the existence of that organization. Now, the next point is that if indeed Gulenists were involved, it would be then one of those rare cases in history where a coup or a revolution was carried out by a group that had an ideology that was totally at odds with its actions. What I mean is this. Again, I'm not saying that it's impossible for this to happen. But generally, from what we know of coups and revolutions, the groups that were found or admitted found to have participated or admitted participating in the coup or the revolution espoused an ideology that resonated with the actions of the coup or the revolution. You find this to be the case practically with all revolutions and coups and even attempted coups. If indeed the Gulenists were involved in the coup, we find ourselves in a paradoxical situation that in terms of their activities in the last few decades, in terms of the voluminous writings and speeches of Fayhsal Gulen, in terms of the content of what they teach in all of their 1,000 plus schools and universities in Turkey and throughout the world, in terms of the textbooks that they use, in terms of the content of what the teachers say in the classes, there's nothing there that points to the idea that they have violent tendencies. So it would be indeed an interesting case of, it would be a case of fraud, you know, that such an organization, so large, with a vast network of, it is not, of course, this has to be pointed out, the Gulenists are not an organization. There are many organizations, as well as individuals, as well as NGOs, in Turkey and throughout the world, that are affiliated, that consider themselves as followers of Gulen and therefore form a vast network of organizations and individuals. But there is not a one large transnational Gulen organization. So I think therefore this idea that you have an organization or a network of organizations that perpetrated a coup, or attempted a coup, which could not have been foretold because there's absolutely no clue at all in their teachings that they have such tendencies. Now, as I was also saying that if you look at the Gulen schools and universities, Gulen schools in Turkey, schools abroad, several in Central Asia. You look at the writings of Gulen, you look at the activities of Turkish cultural centers. For example, you have the Turkish Cultural Center in Singapore, which is affiliated to Gulen. The activities they're involved in terms of interfaith dialogue and so on, they are totally at odds with this idea that we have been given about the Gulenists being terrorists. So if they are indeed involved, and if Fethullah Gulen indeed is involved in a coup, they have really, you know, pulled a fast one on all of us. And it would be a really incredible, I think, case of you know, as they say, pulling the wool over our, what's the expression? Over our heads? Yeah, eyes. Yeah. Now, just a last point in relation to this. Even in the case of clandestine organizations, if it is argued that there is a Gulenist or are Gulenist clandestine organizations, secret organizations, which were behind the coup. But even in such cases where you have clandestine organizations, usually there is some intelligence available about their intentions, about their objectives, about their ideologies, which tends to be congruent with the kinds of actions that they actually perpetrated, or the kinds of activities that they were involved with. I don't think that we do have even such intelligence regarding Gulenist clandestine organizations. I have to point out, because I need, maybe thus far I sound like an apologist for the Gulenists. I'm not. I myself, although I've been associated, I have been invited to their functions in Singapore and in Turkey. In the 90s, in fact, one of my first academic invitations to Turkey 20 years ago was to Fatih University, where I participated in a conference on interreligious dialogue. And so I've come to know about them. And I do see some problems with the movement as far as the overall, you know, development of Islamic culture and Islamic thought is concerned. For example, you see cult-like features among them. They are followers of Fethullah Gulen. They rarely read the works of other scholars, of other Islamic scholars, let alone non-Islamic scholars. Fethullah Gulen his views seem to be, you know, the final word on Islam. And it even seems, although in the early days they tended to promote the works of Bediüzzaman Syed Nursi, it seems that of late they had moved away from that and spent less time openly propagating the works of Syed Nursi, although they claim, of course, and are indeed inspired by Syed Nursi. There are many problems, I would say, associated with the Gulen movement, but it is another thing to claim that they were the main instigators or planners of this attempted coup. And I think we are still waiting to see more than circumstantial evidence of that. On the other hand, I do not personally believe that the coup was orchestrated by the government itself. I think that is also a little far-fetched, because one of the reasons is that apparently some people close to the president and close to the AK party were themselves killed in the attempted coup. So I think it is also highly unlikely that the coup was something orchestrated by the government as an excuse, to provide an excuse to purge Turkish institutions of Gulenists and others who are seen to be enemies of the state. But I think this is enough on the coup itself, because we don't want to spend too much time speculating on these things. Now, what are the implications for us, for those of us who are against extremism? Many would say that the purging of the Gulen movement and their becoming weaker, and the extent to which that would affect their operations in Turkey and also their worldwide operations in terms of the schools and centers and dialogue centers and so on and so forth, this would have an impact on the movement, on the general movement in the Muslim world against extremism. So we're in a paradoxical situation where you have an organization or a movement that is said to have orchestrated a coup in Turkey, but which for a couple of decades have been involved in schools and organizations and publications which have no hint of extremism in them, and which actually function as a force against extremism, providing a more moderate, spiritualist approach to Islam. That is undeniable, because I don't think anyone has come up with any evidence that the Gulenist schools or the universities in Kazakhstan, and I'm not sure where they are, Uzbekistan, they opened one in Phnom Penh, I think 3 or 4 years ago, or in UIN, Universitas Islam Negeri Syarif Hidayatullah in Jakarta, where there is a Gulenist chair, professor holding a Gulen chair. You will not find any evidence of any subversive terrorist or activities or violent inclinations. On the contrary, they have provided a reading of Islam that is, in the eyes of actually extremists, often said to be far too liberal and even secular. So this is the paradoxical situation we are in. Right? If we listen to the official account of what happened in Turkey, they're terrorists. But what they've actually been doing on the ground, what we have seen, what we can examine, is really very modern, and some might even say liberal. Whether you consider liberal as a dirty word or not, you might say it's liberal. Now, what's going to happen to such a movement? Because the Gulen movement is one of the very few transnational movements that is moderate. There are many, of course, moderate movements. Some of the Sufi movements are extremely moderate, but do not have that transnational reach, and certainly have not had the impact that the Gulenists have had in terms of the vast network of schools and universities and other institutions that they've created throughout the world. And many observers have considered the ideas of Gulen, notwithstanding the problems associated with their cult nature and so on, many observers considered their presence and their activities as a force against non-violent extremism. And you know, non-violent extremism is a very serious form of extremism which we are facing everywhere in the Muslim world, and certainly in Malaysia. Non-violent extremism, in my opinion, is more dangerous than violent extremism. Violent extremism is less dangerous in the sense that we all can identify it, and we are all clearly against it. And the security apparatus are doing their best and very often do a good job in terms of identifying potential acts of violence and detaining potential perpetrators and so on. But what is spreading rapidly and often even being supported by the religious and the political elite is non-violent extremism. To give you a very simple, and this non-violent extremism is a stepping stone towards violent extremism. That's the danger. I'll give you an example in this country itself, which is no longer the model for moderation. It is no longer, despite what some people might say, Malaysia is no longer the model for Muslim moderation. Go to anywhere in the Muslim world, it's embarrassing, it's become embarrassing because whenever I travel, people ask me what is happening to your country. In the 1980s, people used to say Malaysia is the country to follow. Moderately Muslim, technologically, economically advanced, able to marriage modernization and Islam. The Turks were saying it, the Iranians were saying it, the Egyptians were saying it. Now they're saying, don't be like Malaysia, look at Malaysia. That's what we need not to be like. Recently, the most recent example of the spread of non-violent extremism is the visit of Zakir Naik. Dr. Zakir Naik came to Malaysia, was received with much fanfare and many positive statements and remarks were made about him. And he's been declared a moderate also in among some circles. The fact is, there are some views of Zakir Naik which are what I would say characteristic of non-violent extremism. When Zakir Naik says, for example, that one should not greet non-Muslims on the occasion of their festivals. You should not say Merry Christmas to Christians, you should not say Happy Deepavali to Hindus and so on. You should not do this. Apart from the fact that the reasoning is chaotic, the reasoning is that if you do say this, it means you are admitting to the truth of the views of the Christians or the Hindus. Whereas any idiot knows, an imbecile who happens to be a Muslim knows that when he says Happy Deepavali to a Hindu, he is not endorsing Hindu beliefs. And when he says Merry Christmas to a Christian, he knows that he's not believing that Christ was born on the 25th of December. But yet, these are the ideas that are propagated by Dr. Naik and the like. In Singapore, in the 1990s, Dr. Naik gave a talk in Singapore. Somebody asked him a question about Osama bin Laden, and he said, if Osama is fighting against a big terrorist, the United States, then I'm with him. But then he did, make a disclaimer. He did say, but I don't know Osama. I've not met him and I have not studied the case, so I don't know. But he did say, if he's fighting America, the big terrorist, I'm with him. So this is the kind. So I'm not suggesting Zakir Naik supports terrorism, but this kind of extremist ideas of the non-violent nature resonates with the ideas and the ideology of terrorists. So there are very few transnational global movements among the Muslims that are putting into place institutions like what the Gulanis have done to act as a force against the spread of extremist ideas. So, to me, what has happened in Turkey, regardless of whether the Gulanis were involved in the coup or not, is going to have this negative impact on the fight against non-violent extremism. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Tas. On that note, we move to the third speaker, Professor Dr. Abdullah Al-Ahsan, who is a professor of history, comparative history at the International Islamic University in Malaysia, who would share with us his thought on this topic and subject matter.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I'm grateful to IAIS for inviting me to speak on this occasion, and also Dr. Muzaffar to share the burden of organizing this event. Fellow panelists and friends, Assalamu alaikum again. I am trying to devote my time to explain who Abdullah Gulen is. It has been mentioned that recently his movement has been identified as federal, and of course, Dr. Al-Ahsan has pointed out, no organization will call itself a terrorist organization. Obviously, it has been given to them by the government press. But at the same time, we need to understand this organization because I have seen so many people confused about this organization. I think when I took up the issue to talk about the subject, I was not aware of the material that are available on the subject. When I started reading, I have to admit that I have not been able to finish reading all the material that I have found. But in brief, there is a controversy about his date of birth, 1938 or 1941. Gulen sources will give both dates, and their followers explain that when he was born, he was not registered, and he was later registered by his father. He made mistake, and they don't take it seriously. He is referred as Hujja Kandi, venerable teacher or esteemed teacher by the followers. He became acquainted with Syed Nursi's works in 1957. 1966, he was recruited by Diyanat, the Religious Affairs Ministry, as a teacher, and he moved to Izmir. And because of his oratory, he was able to attract attention, gained admirers. 1971 coup happened and he was arrested. Within days he was released, and it was alleged from that time that there are some problems in his teachings. Immediately after he was released, slowly, according to some sources, he was recruited by the Turkish military agency to confront the Islamist parties, particularly under the leadership of Erbakan at that time. 1976, he established an institution, Turkish Teachers Foundation and the Akizeli Foundation for middle and higher education. And then 1979, he started publishing a periodical. 1980 coup he supported again. And at this time, it seems that he came even closer to the military authorities. In 1982, he established Yamanlar College in Izmir and Fatih College in Istanbul. Between 1980 and 83, during modern Turkey's longest military junta, Gulen's followers found opportunity in private education. This is from a book by Hendrik, who wrote a dissertation on this subject. And I think, I have not read the whole book, but I have read some of his articles and sounds very logical. Success in secular math, science, and exam-based education created opportunities to expand into other sectors. Youth-oriented organizational model blossomed in the 1980s when hundreds and thousands of bright students were recruited into the movement through the mechanism of exam prep schools. It is this exam prep schools through which he came into direct confrontation with the government in 2013. In 1986, he purchased Zaman newspaper, the Turkish one. 1991 began to establish similar schools outside Turkey, beginning with the Balkan states and post-Soviet Central Asian republics. Now, at this time, it seems that he developed differences with the Turkish military intelligence. But by then, he had already developed relationship with outside agencies. And I think since then, he started to strengthen his forces outside of Turkey. 1994, Journalists and Writers Foundation was established in Istanbul, and also a platform called Avant Platform to organize dialogues between different political parties or different political interests. And at the same time, he also established an association of solidarity in business life, was established a group of small, medium, export-oriented, Gulen-affiliated businessmen. So a business institution. 1996, Asia Finance or Bank Asia was established with small capitalists affiliated with Abdullah Gulen. Now, what happened, I think, at this moment, the situation inside Turkey, his position inside Turkey and outside Turkey were growing parallelly. And since I'm again quoting from Hendrik, following the collapse of Soviet Union, the Gulen movement took advantage of the Turkish state's effort to cultivate relations with post-Soviet republics in Central Asia and Balkans. They began with Turkey's startup capital throughout both regions, and affiliated business ventures followed. To facilitate trade with these regions, the Association for Solidarity in Business Life was established, and a shipping and transport firm was established around the same time. In other words, his influence started to increase toward the business sector and also international relations. In 1997, military again intervened in Turkish politics. Erbakan was removed from power. Again, Gulen was accused of being clandestine religious community with the alleged ulterior motives. He started to pay attention outside. 1998, he met John Paul II and developed interfaith dialogues with the Catholics. 1999, he moved to the United States. And it has been mentioned that some people affiliated with the CIA helped him. I don't think that it matters. Many people, I have also migrated to the United States, so I don't think that it is a crime. You see, what reminds me at this point, I would say that when there is a gap, when he was working closely with the Turkish military intelligence and they dropped him from their blessings, there was a gap created. And that reminds me of Lee Kuan Yew's statement that when Malaysia rejected Singapore, that was the worst day in his life. He was looking for survival and he found some friends. And my hunch is that the same source came to rescue Gulen. And again, before the talk we were talking about it, that it is very difficult to understand how military could work together with Gulen. There was a force, invisible force I would say, which was involved in bringing them together. 2001, he had first Gulen-oriented conference in Georgetown University. 2002 to 2011 was the honeymoon period between AKP and Gulen movement. And I have many friends who are affiliated both with AKP as well as with Gulen universities. A very close friend of mine who has served at a very top position in Fatih University had sent his children to Gulen schools because they had good discipline, and yet he had once told me that the Gulen people had told him that Ahmad was not helping them enough. And they were not happy with him. But I know that in 2009, 10, 11, Turkish Foreign Ministry did have many Gulen-oriented schools around the world. Anyway, then came 2007, and from 2007 to 2013, there were a couple of cases against the military. There were apparently attempts of military coup, which was prevented. This airgun gun and sledgehammer, all these cases, and those who are familiar with Turkish politics would know these cases. These went for a few years, and a number of high-ranking officials were punished. Now, recently, it seems that AKP realized that these were all orchestrated by the infiltrators inside the government machinery, inside the police, inside the judiciary, and also in the academia, because these are the fields where Gulen was working very closely. In fact, when Gulen moved to the United States in 1999, a videotape has emerged saying that Gulen was asking his followers to enter into every single apparatus of the state. And AKP government gave a very good opportunity to them. Now the question is, even though there were many questions, particularly the original followers of Nursi and Arbakan supporters. These two groups were totally opposed to AKP having any friendship with Gulenistas. And I have heard those warnings by them that these people will understand when time comes. They expressed this very clearly. Yet it seems that until 2011 it went on. Then, it was 2010 that it became clear that they belong to two different interest groups. What happened in 2010? The Mavi Marmara event. Mavi Marmara was an event organized by IAIS, a humanitarian organization based in Turkey. They wanted to break the seas of Gaza. They wanted to send a ship. They asked the government for permission. Government said that they will not help, but they will not also prevent. The ship went, and you know what happened. 9 Turks were assassinated by the Israelis. On this event, Gulen came very strongly saying that Turkey should have sought official permission from Israel. But the government position was that we don't intervene whoever wants to do anything, we will not intervene, as long as things are clear. But when it happened, government took it up, and government fought the case, and government also won the official apology from Netanyahu, and you know that it is not easy to get apology from Netanyahu. Obama didn't get it. When Obama was criticizing the Congress decision to host Netanyahu, Netanyahu went and did deliver the lecture. The point I'm making is that there are some forces which are very strong, and Turkey was able to stand because Turkey was able to take a position on the basis of its own footing. And that footing was paying off international loan, IMF loan, from, they became a donor nation from loan-taking nation. And all these were major problems, I would say, for some international players. Now here I have a statement by one medical doctor. I received this statement sometime about 2013, in which this medical doctor from Turkey saying that Erdogan's support for Gaza gave symbolic criticism to Israel. However, his criticism mobilized huge support from Islamic-oriented youth, and Israel became very unhappy with Erdogan's rhetoric. Israel pressured Gulen to stop Erdogan by using the 60 Minutes TV program and New York Times tactical maneuvers. They were saying, if you do not stop Erdogan, all these benefits will stop. Now what happened was that since 1999, Gulen established more than 150 schools in the United States. And all these schools were receiving, they're receiving taxpayers' money. There is a scope in the United States. If you start educational institution, you can get government help. And with this huge establishment, with the help of, now here again there is a big question. I know a person in Minnesota who started a similar school with very good reputation, and yet this school was stopped by ACLU on certain grounds. But these 150 schools are working even now quite independently. And also there are a lot of writings about how some of these schools are, for the construction, for example, Gulen established some construction farms, and those contracts were given to those farms. In other words, all these activities have one root. Of course, you cannot see any illegal activities by these people. They are doing everything legally, but what you see is that even Graham Fuller, his name has been mentioned here, Graham Fuller was vice president of CIA, and on this occasion, immediately after the coup, he wrote an article in Huffington Post. Also, there is a listserv, I think Junaid is a member of that listserv, I don't know, some of you also might be, Sociology of Islam. In that, some people accused Graham Fuller for helping Gulen. Graham Fuller came up very strongly defending himself, that whatever I did was right. So the point I'm making is that Gulen had many connections. I don't think that I have time to go through some of his ideas which are very problematic. And also, I'll point out two kind of activities. Gulen activities in Bangladesh and Gulen activities in the United States. I have already mentioned to you about Gulen activities in the United States, that they have more than 150 schools and also organize dialogues. They have many companies based in the United States and working very closely with some of the establishments in the United States. In Bangladesh, this is very interesting. I think it was 2010, only for about 10 hours, Erdogan went to Dhaka. Because by then, the government of Bangladesh had already started persecuting Jamaat Islamic people, accusing them of collaborating with Pakistan in 1971. Erdogan was trying to persuade the government of Bangladesh that the trials should be fair and transparent, and that is why he went to visit Bangladesh only for about 10 hours, because I was following it closely. Even during that 10 hours, he went to open a Gulen school in the capital of Bangladesh. And after the coup, I was told by a student of mine here in this campus that he called, because he was Gulen supporter, he thought that maybe they are in trouble, but they were receiving very good treatment by the government. The point I'm making is that all these things can happen only when you have some good international picture. Now, the Gulenists have antagonized not only AKP, but also the two main opposition parties. CHP, the main opposition party, there was a sex scandal a couple of years ago inside the party, and it was done by Gulenists. And one of their main strategy is that they would bug the telephonic conversation. That is what you have seen in 2013, that lot of conversation between Erdogan and his son were in the internet. Because they were, you talk to your son about businesses and all those things, and if you take those conversations out of context, you can easily manipulate. So, the point I'm making is that they antagonize CHP by this kind of buggy pieces. They antagonized the MHP, the Nationalist Party. Also, in fact, they were trying to divide the party. Those who follow Turkish politics, they would know it very well. They tried to divide the party. And that is why you can see that the oppositions are with AKP on this issue. Now, I will end with one concluding remark. How would one know whether a party is really Islamic and democratic or not? I think it is not difficult. If you open up your mind, if you think about you have the information about every organization. The first thing that one will notice in Gulen activities is that lack of transparency. Even the close, I mentioned about a friend of mine who has worked with Gulen University for more than 7 years at a very top level. He would not know how the movement works. But at the same time, they have very strong group of people. And what they do is that, I was reading an interview by one of the colonels who was arrested in this coup. And this colonel was assigned as personal assistant of Erdogan. And he admitted that he came from a very poor family. It was sometime around 1988, 89, he was in high school. He was recruited by them, by the Gulenists. And in order to promote him, sometimes he was even supplied with the question paper before the exam, so that he could perform well and he could excel, he could enter into the services that he wanted to go to. So he went to that, and he was responsible for bugging many of Erdogan's conversation. So this is how. Now that is why in 2013, November 2013, when government decided to close down those schools, it was a big shock for them. And that is why December 17, 2013, I happened to be in Ankara that day, that they tried their best. You know that all of a sudden, internet was full of Erdogan's conversation. They were made out. So this is one problem with the Gulen movement, that they are not transparent. Also, I have students who came from Gulen schools, and they say that you cannot read any other books on Islam other than Gulen. This is another indication that you must understand that if the movement is so Islamic, why should they not allow books written by others? More important than all of this is the attitude of the Western press. What is his name? This Farid interviews Gulen in CNN prime time. There are so many persecuted people all around the world. Kashmiris are being killed. These illegal cases are going on in Bangladesh. You don't find them to interview. You have to interview Gulen. So the point I'm making is that this love by Western press is another indication that you should look at. And most important of all is that Gulen would never talk against, say, Iraq invasion, Afghanistan invasion. Today, the rise of extremism in the Muslim world, who is responsible? If you minus Iraq invasion, you cannot explain the rise of all these extremist groups. That is why I'm just saying to those people who think that Gulen is Islamic, you should think about it. Thank you.
you very much, Professor Al-Ahsan. I think we have Mr. Junaid Ahmad, who will be discussing, and we give him this opportunity to somehow wrap up and discuss the views by all panel speakers, and perhaps after that we will open for Q&A.
Assalamualaikum. There's a lot to cover there, and I think that one of the things that I've picked up now in being just a few weeks here in Malaysia is even if there's disagreement, to do it very gently and to do it very politely, particularly with such wonderful panelists who I'm very honored to be with. But let's get to the agreements first. I think that one of the things that we all seem to share in Turkey in the middle of what's happened right now, but I think over the past few years, many years now, since we've seen the emergence of the AKP, even though I don't like the term, but the sort of a moderate form of Islamism or political Islam that has actually taken state power and has not degenerated into some of the worst excesses that perhaps we've seen in other contexts. Everyone here probably is in solidarity with that experiment, which has been incredibly important and incredibly inspiring to Muslims throughout the world. And so what July 15th represented, countering that coup that was attempted, was a victory. And there's no question about that. Not for Erdogan, not even necessarily for the AKP, but for the Turkish people, as Dr. Chandra Muzaffar mentioned earlier. It does represent the victory of democracy, of sovereignty, and transformation, in some ways, of a Turkey in which the institution of the military and the army wielded so much power, and now the people are the custodians of the sovereignty of the Turkish Republic. So that we all can agree on. The other thing, of course, the very complicated nature of the Hizmet movement of Gulen. So we can agree that it's a very complicated and complex global movement, and it's one of the largest Islamic revivalists, if you want to call it revivalist, although according to what Dr. Abdullah said, I don't know if you can call it Islamic, but there's no question, it's a very complicated story, and its rise and its reach is very extensive, and clearly they have done phenomenal work in achieving the status that they have. I don't think there's any question about that. Other countries have been mentioned. The country where I'm from, in Pakistan, you can also see their presence, not just through the cultural things that they organize, but the couple of schools that they have constructed there. Very, very good schools. So that all exists. And I'll get in a second to what, whether that means necessarily that they cannot be political. I'll get to that in a minute. The third thing I think that we all can agree on is the following. That excesses of state repression, of civil liberties, of human rights, due process, so on and so forth, are bad if any state does it and engages in it. Whether it's the Turkish state, the American state, Pakistan, Malaysia, any state that engages in such behavior is bad, and they need to be held accountable for it. And the justification to engage, they need to meet a great burden of proof to engage in such behavior. We can agree on that all of these excesses of states are bad. Now let's get to some of the, not disagreements, but maybe friendly amendments that I can add to some of the points that have been made. I think it's very, very true, and this bounces off of the last point that I'm making, that not just since July 15th, although it has intensified since the coup, the attempted coup, but before that as well, there's been this type of Orientalist attack against Erdogan and the Turkish and the AKP and so on and so forth. They're becoming authoritarian, this standard kind of Oriental despot emerging, so on and so forth. Of course, that is never in the Western media referred to of the dictators and monarchs that flood the region but are US supported. It's never spoken about them, but Erdogan, etc., even though he's in NATO, even though he's very much part of the broader, Turkey and Erdogan are getting a bit too big for their shoes, for their boots, and therefore it's important to constantly keep this Western media outcry of the creeping authoritarianism of this. And all of this is kind of the vulgar propaganda that Western media always engages in when it doesn't like something, that it can't deal with someone or finds them too unpredictable. And I think Erdogan, you saw that very, very clear with what was going on. One of the speakers mentioned this whole obsession about AKP and Erdogan reviving Ottoman rule. And I think that kind of also falls into the same trap. And I think that this is a larger discussion of the question of what it means for Muslims to be involved in projects demanding greater Muslim autonomy. And in some ways, expressing Muslimness in the world today. So in the case of Turkey, it could be very, very clear, oh, well, this is simply a return to the kind of Ottoman dominance that they want to exhibit over the Muslim world. And I think that very conveniently, if we're not careful, falls into the same type of Orientalist narrative around what's going on in the Muslim world, and particularly when a country is becoming more and more influential in geopolitics. You've seen that in the case of Turkey. The final couple of things I wanted to speak about, and I think they're important for the purposes of our discussion. And most of them do revolve around what Professor Al-Ahsan said about speaking about Gulen movement specifically, but then took the discussion to a broader one surrounding non-violent extremism and so on and so forth. The first thing that I would offer in that discussion is the following: that these types of movements, whether it's the Gulenists or any other Sufi movements, or the ones that initially portray themselves as quote-unquote non-political, right? And that term actually needs to be problematized. What is political and what is non-political, right? So these, I think that the cumulative effect of decades and decades of grassroots work by people, by a movement like the Gulenists, is profoundly political. It fundamentally changes the social, cultural, and the political, ultimately, terrain upon which politics happens. So I think that, first of all, it's important to also challenge very narrow notions of what is political and what is not political. Secondly, of course, we know that all of us agree that, of course, Gulen has supported military coups in the past as well. So I mean, that's pretty political. But putting that aside, these movements, their readings, the way they behave, all of this, and this is the main point that I want to hit home, are very much subject to historical, social, and I feel I don't have to tell this to Professor Al-Ahsan, but very much subject to all of these factors, right? Sufi movements, Egypt is a great example right now. All of these quietists, Salafists that the Saudis had on their bankroll, just sitting there quietly. And the Muslim Brotherhood, the Ikhwan, that of course the Saudis had a relationship with before, all of a sudden they want the Ikhwan gone, declared as terrorists, and all of these quietist Salafis sitting around, not involved in politics, activated. Go and engage in politics now. There's so many instances of this, and right now, in fact, one of the major problems in the Muslim world right now and this polarization that has occurred, particularly post-Arab Spring. The Al-Sisi Egyptian example is a very important one. You have, whether it's Al-Sisi or a whole host of other dictators and monarchs and autocrats, UAE, you name it, because of so-called their war against ISIS, they're being in bed, they're being the good Muslim, not in the sense of their theological moderation, mind you, but being the good Muslim in terms of their alignment with the foreign policy of the West, being able to kind of be considered moderate and supporting, even in this Gulenist coup, there's strong evidence that the UAE and the Saudis were supportive. Now, how does that work? You have the moderate Gulenists with the moderate readings and so on, supported by these Salafi Wahhabis, etc. So, which I then offer to you as suggesting something else. that in fact something else is being protected here. Beyond simply theological readings of your tradition and so on, there's a larger structure, a system of global capitalism, a global hegemony, which is being protected in all of this, in which these actors play a role. In fact, the country that I come from, I mean, this knows it best. Before the 1980s, you had all these madrasas in Pakistan, preserved in orthodoxy, not an unproblematic one, conservative. You could even call their views on certain things extremist. Were they engaged in the type of violence they were? No. There's a particular historical political moment called the Afghan Jihad, completely supported by the entire Western political establishment, which converted these not unproblematic, orthodoxies and extremist orthodoxies into violent fundamentalisms because of the objective of the Western political establishment, the Saudis and the Pakistanis, to oust the commies, the bad commies from Afghanistan. So those madrasas that had nothing to do with politics, the ulama and the teachers said to them, you are here for deen, not for the affairs of dunya. Now all of a sudden you can go and be involved in the affairs of dunya when it's required for the prerogatives of power. Right? And so these movements work. Just one or two last examples. Professor Al-Ahsan mentioned Ahmadina, considered to be a clown in South Asia as well. He's on the TV shows, but really, he's, sorry, not Ahmadina, Zakir Naik. He engages in these inter-religious debates, etc. Islam is better because of this, and I know all of these things. He's on the TV show, but no one really is taking him that seriously, nor does he really have that. But the point is, of course, I think we all, at least most of us, agree that he has some, really idiotic views on things. But the specific one you mentioned about Osama bin Laden, Zakir Naik said, it's also important to remember, and there's a great book that was published after 9/11 by Tariq Ali, The Clash of Fundamentalisms. The introductory chapter, he says, places like Greece, the Greek state had to suppress the media which was covering a good percentage of the population of Greece out in celebration of what happened on 9/11. So this was clearly not a Muslim problem, this irrational celebration of the killing of innocents. So it represented far more than a religious thing and far more of a political thing. And I think that we can agree on that these types of things, of course, it's far more than having to do with religion and has far more to do with politics. But the other thing also, as he spoke about Zakir Naik, I remembered someone else, and who's probably much more sophisticated. I think he passed away a few years ago, Ahmad in South Africa. Very much on the same style, debating religions. Islam is better than this. Ahmad and in general another global Islamic revivalist movement, the Tablighi Jamaat. I'm sure they have a presence here in Malaysia as well. Arguably, I think the largest Islamic pietistic revivalist movement. And one of the interesting stories I remembered was a very prominent anti-apartheid activist in South Africa, one of the leading Muslim liberation theologians in the world, when he was jailed in the 1980s at the height of the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa. The police asked him, he was very much involved, they asked him, the South African white apartheid regime asked him, why can't you be like those other Muslims? The ones that have the long beards, etc. And he was referring to the Tablighi Jamaat. They don't get involved in politics, and that, of course, these guys didn't care what views they had on religious pluralism or women or anything like that. All they cared about was that they didn't represent a threat to the apartheid system, which these activists, many from the Muslim youth movement, etc., did. So he asked him, why can't you be like those bearded with the Tablighi Jamaat, etc., that did not get? So I immediately thought of that. And so there's a problem in accepting the terms of a discourse. And of course, we've spoken about this at JUST, that says that, well, these guys are the moderates, are the liberals, are the good Muslims, and these ones are the bad ones, just on the basis of kind of some theological reading. When in fact, one can be more complicit in violence And this is the last point that I wanted to say. I mean, no part of the world knows this better than the Muslim world, that secular liberal authoritarianism can commit just as much violence, if not more, than religious extremist violence. I mean, that in some ways, what we see now, the kind of Islamist responses in the Muslim world, is precisely in the context of the excesses, of the failures, and of the violence of secular authoritarianism that has basically been a phenomenon throughout the Muslim world. The final thing that I will say is that Turkey and Iran, I would add to that, in some ways present unique cases. Because, and I think this was mentioned earlier, they were not colonized, or at least fully colonized societies. So in some ways, whether the Islamic Revolution in Iran, and this is not to say that everything, I or anyone here supports everything that happened there, or the AKP for that matter, and the Islamist experience, what's going on in Turkey right now, is flawless. No one's arguing that. But it does say that there's a moment of decolonization which perhaps has already taken place. In fact, these societies are interesting because what they probably engaged in was auto-colonialism, self-colonization. In Turkey, it was a project of Kemalism. And Iran, you had the project of the Shah, and so on. So it's in fact, and Professor Al-Ahsan has spoken and written widely on this issue, so this is why I raise it. It is precisely the fact that they have this decolonial space why you see the increased level of confidence in these societies to take up these projects for Muslim autonomy, and why perhaps other societies, like Pakistan, still need to undergo, in some ways, that decolonial and that decolonization process in order to try to do the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Junaid. We are open to the floor for these interactive sessions. I have seen Mr. Ghazali's hand, and then we will have the ladies at the back and the gentlemen at the back for the first round. We will see how it works, but please be precise. And you may ask the questions to the panelists, including the discussion, if you may want to. Can I have that?
Good afternoon, Assalamualaikum. I'm Dr. Ghazali. I have worked in the Islamic Development Bank in Jeddah for 13 years. We have covered the whole Muslim world and the West. Thank you very much for the very informative and very intelligent discussion on the case of Turkey and the future of Islam Muslim politics. Being closely tied to the Muslim faith has been defined in our vision of the bank for the Muslim world. At the back of the discussion, we have not touched about the history of global geopolitical engagement of Islam and the current power in the region. We are, to my mind, we are looking at revisiting the hegemony of the WAPs, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, against the other worldviews. In 2015, in the World Davos, they talk about the new global context. They have mentioned the world is no longer unipolar, it is multipolar. It has manifested today not on political empire rebuilding, but the what Fayhsal was talking about, the new redefinition of world power through globalization called the economic hegemony of Asia in order to sustain what they had in the last 200 years. Because of the fact that the Muslim world controls 70% of oil, this is coming from the Farid Leadership Foundation discussion, we are trapped between the bear and the elephant. You know, you mean what, right? So you understand. So what I allude to the young man talking about, we are the 70 years of the promise of the Second World War, we are still caught in the debate that the world shall be defined only in their world-view image. We in the Muslim world of 70 years are still struggling to be decolonized and to be despolarized. I come from Islamic Development Bank because in 2008, when the world had a global financial crisis, 5 nations of the bank went to IMF to say to them that Islamic finance has a place in world history. It was rejected. But I challenge all of you in this world, in this room and outside anywhere, where do you have Chinese finance? Where do you have Indian finance? Islam offers a universal perspective of life for humanity until today and from Adam. And therefore I like to put the crisis in Turkey as a revisit of struggle of how religion, politics, economics dominate the needs phase of the 21st century. And the rise of China and the emerging rise of India, that is Confucianism and Hinduism, will occur again as what we see in the early days of Ottoman, Al-Bruni and all the rest. We are engaging in intellectual discourse. That begins it. If today power and interest dominate, we are not going to have any universal peace. But Islam being what it is, we do not fight for rights and power. We fight for truth and justice. And that shall be the continual perennial undertaking of all nations. And therefore there will be continual debate and there will be continual fight for what has to be the universal message. And therefore I say today, IAIS has a major role to understand that Turkey represents the new post-1934 debate. And I have a book here, The Classical Age of Turkey for 300 Years. It's not going to be a one-day struggle as on the 15th July. We are starting the next 300 years debate. Thank you very much.
Can we have the lady? Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Esra. I'm interning IRF and I'm Turkish and studying in Fatih University. The time is short, but there are so many points actually I would argue, like Mavi Marmara or more than 60,000 people who were sacked from official seats, not only police officers or military services, but also medicals or universities. And we, including 66,000 people, students from 15 universities, after they shut down, we were not studying in any university. So we have also suffering so much after the coup. And my first question is, how do we say that it's victory of people who stopped coup, who came together to promote democracy? Because during the coup we saw people who were slaughtering, who were involved in the coup. So people who want to stop the coup were actually torturing who were involved with the coup. So people who torture or people who slaughter heads of the people can promote democracy. Is it possible? How they can support rule of law? How can they support freedom of expression? Because when millions of people gathered in Yenikapı to celebrate that we were not under military, its meeting turned out to pro-government, not pro-government but pro-Erdogan meeting. So if you say anything that like I'm Gulenist, but I do want democracy in Turkey, I do want rule of law, you will be dead in 2 minutes. You will be slaughtered by people who were there to promote so-called democracy in Turkey. And also the second question I would like to ask is how Malaysian government sees establishment of Gulenist the dialogue centers or universities, because we saw some Central Asian countries were shut down. In Kazakhstan or in Senegal, in Kenya, they shut down the universities of Gulenist universities. But for example, in Kyrgyzstan or in some countries, they say it's domestic. If you say something like this, it's interference of our domestic posts. So I would like to learn how Malaysia sees this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can we have that gentleman and then we'll open to the
Thanks, sorry, Nicole, right. I just like to, 3 questions to deconstruct Gulen. I stood here, I think a year ago in the same place, arguing with a Gulen, you invited a Gulenist to come and talk about how Gulen is similar to Sufi, and I disagree. I think, yes, Gulen is part of a network of terror, and that's neoliberal terror. Neoliberal terror in the very sense that the charter schools that he owns, I think charter schools which the US itself claims, just recently the Supreme Court declared charter schools illegal, it's a network of privatizing public education, making it inaccessible to everyday people. If Gulen was really interested in the rights of education, I think the language of rights and education has to be put firmly and clearly out there, and does not need to be translated to the language of charter schools. And the medias, the 22 media outlets that Gulen owns. So my question is, this network of terror, if we are talking about a message of peace, how do we consolidate it with the whole network of what we would call a Western neoliberal model of accumulating, which is very economically dispossessing people and Muslims around the world? Maybe if Professor Syed could talk about that. And just a very quick one on the people of Turkey. When you say the people of Turkey actually consolidating power after the coup, who is the people? Because it's a very blurry word to use the word people. I think no one spoke about the massacring of Kurds, which is actually happening, which is very much instigated by Erdogan. But what has been Gulen's, if he is truly for human rights, truly for an alternative, what has been the alternative that Gulen has spoken about the massacring of Kurds? And my final question is to Prof. I did hear that Syed Aratas and also the other Prof talked about there's no actually connection to why Gulen would want to overthrow the government. But the thing is, Gulen worked very closely with the AKP to consolidate power in 2004. And that was after 10 years that the party had majority. And the very fact is that Gulen has been working as a president to consolidate his power even stronger. And the Gulenist movement has actually been unhappy about it because it was them who consolidated power with the help of AKP. And there is a reason why the other coalition parties, even though they don't like it, would still agree for working with the Gulenist parties because it consolidates, it helps them to influence the supporters of Gulenists and for them to get power. That's how AKP got the power. And at the moment now when things have fallen out, Gulen has been supporting, the US sees the need to actually support Gulen because of the whole Euro-Turkey rapprochement that is happening, which I think is good. So there is a bit of how there's an internal problem which the US is actually expropriating. And this is again about a fight of power. So maybe if you could talk about, there is actually a connection. There is the Gulenist movement who did help the AKP to consolidate power. And Gulen does work with powerful people around the globe. And this last point of mine is about the FBI. It's very funny to me because the very newspapers that actually was tarnishing Gulen's name in the New York Times and all these papers suddenly turns 360 degrees and talks about how a great cleric it is. The FBI raided his charter schools. Pakistan is actually looking into an investigation into the charter schools. The OIC is looking into an investigation, so many. But the media that was suddenly so against this man, the Western media, which we all are cynical about, suddenly turns 360 degrees and now are so pro Fayhsal Gulen. Why do you think that happens and what is the cause of it? You know, it's all again power.
Thank you. Can we have the response? This is the first round. You want to open it? Oh, you can just respond for the first round. Also, have some more. Yeah? Okay. Okay, we have.
So I'm not sure what exactly the question was, but well, there were, I think the lady from Turkey had a specific question, gentleman just now. But first of all, let me respond to the gentleman from the Islamic, what bank was that? Islamic Development Bank. Okay. Just to say that, we always, it's very typical in conferences, seminars such as this, when Muslims are involved, to talk about the West, talk about the US, talk about the superpowers, and how they are to blame for our problems. And of course, it is partly true, or very true. I studied sociology, and one of the basic things in undergraduate sociology student studies is sociology of development, where we learn about Western economic imperialism and geopolitics and so on and so forth. So we know all these things, but it is it's not correct to then assume that our leaders do terrible things simply because they're manipulated by Western powers. There is control, of course, and the fact that countries are forced into a neoliberal kind of regime, or are forced into, like in the past, IMF restructuring program and so on and so forth. All these things do imply that they do show that there are certain things that we cannot do on our own. But no Western power or no power forced Saddam Hussein to do the things he did, or forced Gaddafi to rule the way he did, or forced the Shah of Iran to do some of the things that he did, or closer to home. Yeah, we are very much a part of global capitalism. It would be very hard for I think Malaysia to turn communist if we wanted to. We would not be allowed to. But at the same time, no American president or no superpower is forcing our government or our prime minister or our cabinet, our other ministers to do some of the things they're doing. To take the very extremist turn we have been taking the last few years, no need to go into all the details. We know many of the details. So the fact is, the US, for example, may have a lot of influence, but it does not micromanage our politics. We are to blame for that. So we can understand the context, US imperialism, etc., etc. We can understand the context, but then let's concentrate on fixing what we can actually fix within that context. Now, I also wanted to point out, because this has sort of been, the tone of the discussion so far. You see, I do not know who was involved in the coup and who was the main instigator. That is not to defend Gulen or Gulenis. But my point is this: to recognize certain problems with the Gulen movement, the lack of transparency, as was brought up by Dr. Abdullah, the lack of transparency, the cult nature of the movement, which I refer to myself, the fact that the Gulenis or followers of Gulen have been understood as exhibiting a Protestant-like type of capitalism, and therefore their understanding of development is very Protestant-like and therefore pro-capitalist. and not anti-capitalist. And one could criticize them for having such a stance. We can identify many critical points about the Gulen movement, but identifying these critical points and identifying such faults, if they are to be regarded as faults, is not the same thing as saying that they were involved in the coup. The fact was also brought up by Mr. Junaid that certain liberal organizations or quietist organizations may actually support or be involved in violent acts. Of course, this is true. We know this throughout history. But how does that happen? It either happens because that particular liberal or moderate group was actually not liberal and moderate. They were clandestine. They were hypocrites, or they were hiding their true beliefs, or there are unanticipated consequences from their genuinely liberal or moderate beliefs that led to violence. In any case, we need to understand the mechanism and the process in which this takes place. Now, this has not been said for the Gulenists. Are they clandestine organizations associated with them? Or are there unanticipated consequences of their so-called liberal or moderate beliefs that led to violent actions? I'm all for such argument, because we are trained to make such arguments in sociology. Weber's whole argument about how capitalism developed or originated in Western Europe is based on such an argument. It is the unanticipated consequences of Protestant theological beliefs. Protestants were against capitalism, were against being rich, were against spending money, but for theological reasons. But it is such theological beliefs that unwittingly led to vast accumulation of capital. I won't go into the details of Weber's argument. But so it is possible that a liberal or moderate quietist group can engage in violence, but we have to have an argument for that. If we are simply, if we are going to go beyond the view that they were all waiting, there in the shadows, and they fooled everyone, nobody knew that it was going to happen, and it just happened. There has to be a more sophisticated argument.
There is the argument that when you are a capitalist, you want to consolidate power, and when you want to consolidate power, you do anything under the sun.
Yes, of course, but you see, look, that applies to everybody, right? But it is what you would call circumstantial evidence. We are making people are making very serious accusations, and the repercussions of that, thousands and tens of thousands of people being arrested, losing their jobs, students displaced, so many things happening. We can fault an organization for being pro-capitalist, right? And there are many pro-capitalist organizations around the world, but most of them don't espouse violence and don't and even work against it. So we need to have really better arguments and stronger evidence. The lady from Turkey, you said people came out to support. Is that supporting democracy? Look, in any situation, anywhere, when masses of people come out, there are all kinds of groups of people who come out. Of course, there were people, regardless of who we say or believe started the coup, right? Regardless of that, definitely many people came out who, and maybe even some of them were against Erdogan, do not want a coup to happen. They prefer, even though they were critical. I know many Turks who are critical of Erdogan, who are critical of the creeping authoritarianism that has been taking place in Turkey in the last few years. But at the same time, they do not want a coup, because they think the coup would be worse. The results, the new regime after a coup would be far worse. So they prefer the system that they have now. So they came out, even though they don't like Erdogan, but Erdogan was elected. He was elected through democratic means, And if they want to get rid of Erdogan, it should also be through democratic means. So of course there were many people who were Democrats who came out to support democracy. This is not to say that they were not mobs who also came out, and maybe even organized by certain groups to come out and disturb the peace and to do things according to their own agenda. So we don't deny that, but we cannot dismiss the fact that many people who did come out simply did not want a coup to take place, and many of these people were not necessarily supporters of Erdogan, but they were supporters of the process by which Erdogan came to power.
I think this coup was, before this, whatever attempts that were made by Gulen supporters, one major event was Gezi Park event in 2013. A friend of mine who is not part of the government told me that CNN had rented an apartment in that area where this protest march was going to be held, at least a couple of weeks before the event. In other words, the plot was to do something, then condemn the government and slowly change the government. The same attempt was made through this release of tapes. So I don't know whether one has to be very violent to bring a coup. You can bring, then of course violence comes and take advantage of it. I'm really sorry to hear this, that students have been displaced and nowhere to go. I totally disagree with the government's method of suppressing these schools. What perhaps they should have done is to change the administration or call the administration, or question them and put them into the regular process. Or perhaps open new schools as an alternative so that students can go to those schools and perform the same kind of performance that one would have expected. Then, in other words, you provide an alternative. Democratically, this is how it is done. But unfortunately, government used power to suppress the Gulenists. Now, if you look at Gulen activities, you can see the commitment of these people and the wisdom of these people. The schools in America are called harmony schools. You need harmony in that society. And schools are doing very well in terms of bringing different groups, different religions into school, activities and performing very well. And therefore, you cannot stop any organizations by force. You have to give alternative in the same manner. In Bangladesh, the schools are called hope schools because people don't hope. Ibn Khaldun says that in order to bring a civilization into life, you will need to create hope. So the point I'm making is that some of their activities were great. Only problem with them, as we have mentioned, is lack of transparency. If that could be cultivated, I know personally that in 2009-2010, Gulen was offered to establish a political party. He flatly declined. Because if you are interested in politics, that is the democratic way one should go. But he declined, and he chose these means that he did in 2013. Gulen is not silent on the Kurdish issue. Gulen is a strong supporter of suppression of the Kurdish people. When AKP started negotiation with the Kurdish groups, Gulen was totally opposed to them. And that is why you see that, among Gulen supporters, you will hardly find any Kurd coming to support him. Now, the relationship between AKP and Gulen is a problematic relationship, and I think recently Erdogan has admitted that he made a big mistake, and he is paying for it. Thank you.
Much having said by Professor Abdullah and Professor Farid on the important questions, I just want to highlight the ideal of Fethullah Gulen. He is, if we were to study his works and also his actions, his views on current issues, he is pretty much a Democrat in his idealism. Yeah? So it is not strange for me to see him opposing Erdogan, who is now showing his authoritarian streak as a politician and as a president. But if I were to wear a realist cap in analyzing Erdogan's geopolitical strategy, I fully support his move to consolidate his power as the president, or in Turkish word, Küçük Sultan, the small sultan. Why is that? Because he is dealing with a region that is so problematic. With that kind of setting and context, you need a strong man to govern a nation that is surrounded by destabilized regimes. So, for example, to Democrats among the Turks, they would oppose President Erdogan's move in consolidating his power as a president. He was a prime minister, then he became the president. He appointed our Professor Davutoglu as his right-hand man for the premiership. In a view, actually, like how President Putin did in Russia, called castling. Under the constitution, you can only serve for certain years, then you have to step down as a prime minister and allow other people to contest. But you can be the president because it is not barred by the constitution. So, in order for President Putin in Russia to consolidate his power, he appointed his trusted right-hand man, the Prime Minister Medvedev, to replace his position while he became the president. But the real power lies not in the Prime Minister, but in the president. So what President Erdogan is trying to do is similar to President Putin has done in Russia, which we call castling, like you play chess. As castle, you move forward and backward. Because in democratic institution, it's impossible to have a leader like Tun Mahathir to rule the country for 22 years. In order for you to set up your grand design as a nation, you must have strong support and lengthy time to plan and also execute your plan. So, since Turkey, Russia is a democrat in terms of political system, there's a need in real political sense to do what Erdogan and Putin has done. Because we have to remember the bigger picture that I've shown just now. The Middle East will be far worse if President to be Hillary Clinton will be in power coming next year, because she has to resolve what she has planned when she was the Secretary of State. All the leaked emails released by WikiLeaks clearly showed how she has planned to topple Gaddafi, how she planned to incubate ISIS via the moderate rebels by funneling weapons, raising the sentiments of corruption among the Syrian people to revolt against the government. The Arab Spring, how Google hosted a cyber dissident conference in Budapest, inviting all the Arab bloggers to rekindle or prepare for the Arab Spring. These are all seem like conspiracy theory, but it's real. It's real. Most of the Arabs who fought in Arab Spring, they have genuine concern. They are patriotic, they want to make sure the government heard their plights, but at the same time they are also being used by the foreign agents, like how in the past, how when CIA wants to topple Sukarno, they funded Masyumi, the Islamic Party. It's declassified already. So it's not strange if Gulen also being infiltrated or being used by CIA for this agenda without Gulen realizing it, because he is sincere in doing what we call nahi munkar, providing the wrong according to Islamic injunction. As a preacher, as an Islamic movement, he saw corruption. Man ra'a minkum munkaran falyughayyirhu, as the Prophet said. You change it according to your ability. If you are a regulator, use your power, your hand. If you are a writer, use your pen as a journalist. So the dynamics is complex. But the real issue that I want to pinpoint here is that one must do what one has to do. As a president of Turkey, Erdogan clearly need to control the army, who is not fully with him because of NATO influence since the early days of Kemalism. Yeah? Because NATO has infiltrated using all sorts of means. So when the Islamists came into power, they need to have that shawkah in Arabic, in Islamic philosophy, Islamic political philosophy term, al-shawkah. Yeah? The need to control the power. So for me, it's not strange for Turkey to follow Russia's step to be a democratorship kind of government. Democracy plus dictatorship. It's a mixture of two seeming paradoxical kind of ideology, but it's real. It's real because of the necessity of the current situation. Turkish politics demand a strong leader. So although I disagree with how he handled the Gulenists, I supported his détente with Iran and Russia for the greater benefit of the Muslim world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is 10 to 6. We have a very fruitful discussion. I know I saw your hands, but I think I need to seek permission from the audience as well as the panel. Shall we continue for the second round, or we are exhausted already? Okay, if you allow that, sorry. Then we have the second round, and it will be the last. And I saw Syed's hand. Maybe I have to have. I saw one hand over there. Okay, that lady. I'm so sorry because you have given the opportunity, so we may allow some other participants. I saw one hand over there. Okay, and that gentleman in front of you, the gentleman. Okay. So sorry, we allow more than 3. Okay. Gentleman at the back. Okay. Can we have you that too, please?
Thank you, Assalamualaikum. I hope we can also discuss the impact of what is happening in Turkey on our country. Sad to hear the comment by Professor Al-Ahsan that yes, Malaysia, people looked up to Malaysia and Turkey in the past as good examples of progressive Islamic countries. I think both are almost gone, and we really do not know what's going to happen in our country, and Turkey is not exactly doing very well. This reminds me of the verse in the Quran where the Prophet Abraham, he was searching for the truth, searching for Allah, and he started looking around, and he observed the I think it was the stars in the sky, the moon, and then he said, this is my Lord. And then it set. So he said, no, this cannot be the truth I'm looking for. And then he looked at the moon, and then it set. So this seems to be the trouble with Islamic countries. We're always looking at religious organizations, religious leaders, and unfortunately they all set on us. You know, they all end up in some kind of misery. We need to relook this and maybe rethink this all over again. My point is, we have a problem now in Malaysia. See, we have this ISIS terrorists. In Malaysia, if you're an ISIS terrorist, you're a sympathizer, you are immediately arrested. And true enough, the government has arrested, I think, more than 100 people for involvement in ISIS. And there's more of them who have gone to fight in Syria, Iraq, and stuff like that. Places like that. Now, we all know, or the government knows, I keep track of this, the path into Syria to join ISIS is through Turkey. So what these guys do is from here, from Malaysia, they travel to Ankara, where they're immediately taken under the wing of the Turkish military. This is open secret. The Turks say want to dispute, we can dispute. Yeah? There is an infrastructure that accepts these young people and takes them to the border with Syria, and they join ISIS. Then when they come back to Malaysia, we arrest them. Okay? So why don't we stop this? Why don't we talk to the Turkish government? And I hope the members of the panel, people on the floor here, will take this up. We have complained to the Americans on certain things that they have done recently. We called the American ambassador and scolded them over certain issues. But have you spoken to the Turkish people and tried to put a stop to this flow of terrorists from Malaysia into Syria through Turkey? So when they come back, we arrest them. Now why don't we do anything? Because, unfortunately, there are people in the ruling party who look up to Erdogan as an Islamic leader, as a great leader. This is the sun and the moon and the stars that is set now, you see. We've been confused. So we create problems for ourselves too. So I hope we'll be more realistic, and I hope people here will take it up. We need help from the Turks to put a stop to our boys going there and becoming terrorists. That's my point. Thank you very much.
Can we have that gentleman?
I have two questions to Dr. Attas. I once read your interview about the decolonizing the academics, and you were saying decolonizing the academicians and about the pathologies of Muslim intellectualism. You are saying that the Islamic thought has been so much lagging behind in terms of taking the modernity and all these things. So when you were praising Malaysia about it being a good combination of modernity and Islam, but what do you think about the Turkey and Iran in terms of challenging the Western hegemony in economy, in thought, etc.? And how do you see that Iran and Turkey will contribute in terms of Islamic civilization? And the second point is that the way you are articulating the Salafi or the religious conservatism, okay? Because I think about greeting the non-Muslims, this is a big issue, and if you go in that way, you can easily blame Imam Abu Hanifa or Imam Shafi for being non-violent extremists, I think. So in Western academia, in recent times, often the Salafis are blamed for bringing extremism or hatred, etc. But don't you think that it is something, an Orientalist expression? Because I think the nationalist conservatives can also be violent enough, and if we go that way, we can easily close the path for Zakir Naik or others Salafi speakers of JUST-IAIS to become visible in the society. Thank you.
Can we have that lady?
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for giving me this time. My name is Julia. I have many hats, but let's say I'm coming from the Higher School of Economics in Moscow. So as a lady from Turkey, I thought that I had to have my say here. My comment refers mostly to Brother Ahmad Fayhsal. I saw that you are so much of a supporter of this picture painted by, I think, Robert Fisk, of Turkish Caliph and Russian Tsar, and then borrowing various ideas from each other. You know, my friend from Transparency International Russia, the director of it, he has a special theory that all the autocrats in the world, they have a limited edition version of a special journal where they're sharing ideas in between each other of how to rule and to suppress the nations better, like Mahathir, like Putin or Erdogan. I think you made addressed several statements which are not completely true, and since you rely so much on geopolitics, I wanted to just address them. Yes, NATO eastward expansion, of course, it bothers Russia a lot, and it bothers the others, but it wasn't the sole reason of Russia intervening into Syria. We have other interests there, and first and foremost, we are largest arms supplier to that country. And yes, probably Russia doesn't mind to align itself somehow with the resistant axis which Iran is promoting together with Syria, but this is not the main reason. We also have military reports over there. And yes, of course, we were using it as a somehow investment for future negotiations with the West regarding sanctions, which are imposed on Russia and which Russia suffers heavily currently. But again, it's not the main reason. I wouldn't agree with your statement that Ukraine is so much of a failed state. Have you ever been to Ukraine? It's far from being any Afghanistan. It functions well, and yes, there are its own problems, but it's far from being a failed state. It has functioning institutions. Yes, Russia and Syria, they reinstated relationship, but the reason is again, the cause is far from being, for example, importance of the Turkish stream that you mentioned. Economically, it's not a very efficient project, and even if it's going to be reinstated currently, it's not going to function even half of what was planned. And for Russia, mostly it's just another way to go around Ukraine for supplying the fuel to oil, to Europe, sorry. And for Turkey, it's just probably another taking up the role of being a special hub for the oil and gas. And the other thing also, I just couldn't pass by the price of oil decreased because Iran flooded the market with its oil. Unfortunately, the price for oil was decreased long time ago. It dropped long time ago, so Iran has nothing to do with it, and Iran is now suffering because with the less supply, it didn't return to the previous levels before it was sanctioned in 2012 with these crippling sanctions imposed by Europe. And the simple reason of reinstating the relationship between Russia and Turkey, and I will explain why I'm talking so long about that and how it is related to our topic. The most simple reason I can tell you is because of another stream, the tourist stream. The pressure exerted on Erdogan from the local vendors and hotel owners because of the lack of, because of the problems with their business. And the problem in Russia, because our tourists do not go to Egypt anymore, that they don't go to Turkey anymore, and they go to Crimea. Crimea is ours. You know how expensive it is? It's not effective, and Putin is also facing pressure from inside the country. So this is the simplest and most important reason why the reinstated relationship, and it's far from being any axis of resistance together with Iran. Relationship between three countries, Turkey, Iran, and Russia, are very complicated, and they are not based on any axis of resistance because each of them was at certain point of history ready to trade its partners, the so-called partners in this alliance, for certain benefits which it could receive from West or from America. For example, how after 2009 sanctions, Russia refused to supply anti-missile complex to Iran, and many other examples. And even to me, these recent visits that we evidenced of Mohamed Zarif to Turkey and Erdogan to Russia, and then shaking hands with Putin, it's more of a face-saving procedure, and of the reasons that I just said, rather than being any axis of resistance. And I think what we were lacking in this discussion is thinking of that actually most of the Turkish politics is also local, and many things that Erdogan does is not because of any strive for Islamization or because any certain stance even in the foreign policy. but because he has certain tasks in the domestic policy. For example, he needed a blitzkrieg, a little victorious war in Syria, supporting Turkmens, or little intervention. When on the eve when he was going to conduct a referendum to transform Turkey into presidential republic. And many things rulers in both countries, Turkey and Iran do, they exactly come from the local politics, not from foreign policy, and not because they have any kind of bigger picture or bigger vision. I think we should paraphrase a term by Olivier Roy here, who was talking that we shouldn't talk about radicalization of Islam. We should talk about Islamization of radicalism. I would paraphrase it and say that we should talk about Islamization of politics. And sometimes you see how much scattered it is, and how much this trying to cover up real political aspirations with some kind of Islamized picture, it really fails. We had Erdogan at Istak, which was founded by uncle of Professor Farid here, and where Professor Abdullah Al-Ahsan used to teach as well. And Erdogan came there to receive his honorary degree from the hands of the rector, Dr. Zalim Hakmaruddin. She's a woman, the rector of the Islamic University in Malaysia. And at the end of the ceremony, Erdogan gave hand to the rector to shake it, and she accepted it. For you to know, all the students of the Islamic University in Malaysia are urged that men and women should not have any contact in between each other. And I personally was asked several times by my dean, a respected man, do you shake hands with men? And then I see Erdogan shaking hands with a woman of Shafi'i Mazhab here in Malaysia. And I understand how scattered this picture of Islamization in his head is. Because, devil is in details. And you should pay attention to that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. The gentleman in front. You are the mother for the last.
Assalamualaikum. It's a very beautiful program. I enjoy. I learned a lot about Turkey today from 5 famous people. But there is a bigger, huge, bloody, ugly-looking elephant in the room. What I mean is secularization. Now you address the issue of secularization. Basically, we call it Kemalism. What will be the legacy of colonialization in Turkey in the post-coup? What is the route that Erdogan will go to take in order to I use the word dismantling secularization in Turkey. But another better term, I think, I borrow from Dr. Chandra's word, reflowering of Turkish Islam. We do have that before. In what way the flowering will be done in Turkey? How to dismantle this big elephant there? In what way, in what form? Enlighten us, please. Assalamualaikum.
We have the panelists in this one.
Okay, I will, it's already quite late, so I will try to respond very fast. The first question, I forget who talked about it. I think Syed about the Turkish military bringing Malaysians or foreigners to the Syrian border to facilitate the entry into ISIS. You see, these are the things that are difficult to discuss because we don't really have the space to discuss it, and they should be discussed more. On a similar idea, let me put it this way. I have for some time, and many people also have wondered how serious the so-called war against terror is. For example, it was known for I think almost up to a year, that oil from ISIS-controlled territories, Mosul for example, was being transported to Turkey through Syria. And the Americans knew about it, the Russians knew about it, but for all that time there were no efforts to prevent it. And it was suspected that Turks were buying the oil, right? Including people who were close to the government. So these accusations have been made, there's intelligence about it. How true it is another matter, but you wonder why it is so difficult to take out convoys, trucks, transporting oil from Iraq through Syria to Turkey. How could that go unnoticed? Also, over the years, you have bits and pieces of information revealed about official US views about Al-Qaeda, the view that they considered it important to have the presence of Al-Qaeda in Iraq to act as a buffer between different states, or the US view that it's good to play up on sectarian differences in Syria in order to create a wedge in the population. So these are important aspects of the interplay between the superpowers and the domestic politics of Muslim states, and they need to be discussed. In our own country, we have, for certain reasons, our government playing up the sectarian differences between Sunnis and Shia, even though Shiites are an insignificant population in this country. So again, you also wonder about which are the forces behind that, which are the external forces behind that. But whatever the external forces are, you have to blame ourselves for being so stupid to fall into the trap. The question about Iran and academic hegemony and so on, it's not really the place for me to go into those issues. All I can say is that I have, of course, been very supportive of Iran's challenge to global hegemony, but at the same time, you have to recognize that domestically Iran has been a very brutal regime to its own people. So we need to be honest in the way we talk about issues, right? At a conference on, this is related to your topic of academic hegemony, we have had several conferences on decolonization of knowledge, decolonizing our universities in Malaysia. Now in all these conferences, they turn out to be West bashing sessions. The critique of Western hegemony in education, it is true there is Western hegemony, but the critique that we find emanating from many Muslim countries, including Malaysia, is very unsophisticated. Secondly, it is also hypocritical, because while we are blaming the West for our educational woes, we are not taking a good look at our own problems. The dismal status of our educational institutions, the dismal status of our universities, the academic fraud and plagiarism that is becoming more and more widespread, the substandard of the scholars, and so on and so forth. So you can't deal with educational problems, and you can't deal with the problem of Western hegemony in education or academic imperialism in education unless you also at the same time deal with the internal problems for which we cannot blame the West. Whatever the problems the West has in terms of trying to assert academic imperialism, they don't encourage us to plagiarize. They don't encourage us to engage in academic fraud and so on and so forth. On the issue of Salafism, you were saying that you can't always blame the Salafis. There are also, I'm not sure exactly what you were saying, but you were saying there are other problems. I have written here, the Salafis are the problem, and I've circled it many, many times. They are the problem. But I would not say that Salafis are the only Muslim extremists. There is also Sunni extremism, there is also Shiite extremism. For example, much of the ideas, depending on which period and who you're talking about, of the Ikhwan al-Muslimin are extremists. The Shirazi group or movement among the Shiites is also very extremist. They pronounce takfir on Sunnis. There are Shiite extremist groups and there is Shiite extremist ideology, there is Sunni extremist ideology. But for me, the most dominant in the world today is Salafi extremism. Right? Well, let's be clear about that. Salafism is not always a boogeyman. Sometimes they are really there, being extremists, thinking in extreme fashion and performing extremist deeds. Again, it's not to say there is no Sunni extremism, but the point is the Sunni extremists are not causing the same kinds of problems that Salafi extremists are. Now, you gave the example of, you said if there are Salafi extremists, then there are also Hanafi and Shafi extremists. Well, there are. But in our part of the world, we have dealt with those problems historically. Unfortunately, they're coming back now. For example, Imam Shafi'i in the Kitab al-Umm, he was of the opinion that Christians, that there should not be crosses on displayed on the churches. This was the view of Imam Shafi'i. But the Shafi'is do not take that view. Because the Shafi'is, in other words, after centuries of development of Shafi'i jurisprudence, there are certain views associated with Imam Shafi'i himself that have not come into Shafi'i jurisprudence. So we don't take that view. And therefore, for centuries, we have not had a problem with crosses on churches in Malaysia or in Indonesia. These views have only come recently. They are revived because of the growing extremism. So we are predominantly Shafi'i in this part of the Muslim world, in Malaysia and Indonesia, and we have practiced a very accommodating form of Islam and have never considered our practice and understanding of Islam to be a compromise, but by nature it is accommodating. Now you are having the influence of Salafi ideas that is bringing out extremist tendencies even in the Sunnis. I've written about this and talked about this very much, so I won't go into all the details. But there is definitely evidence, not an emotional view, there is evidence, it is a fact that Salafism as a form, as an orientation in Islam is a problem in the world today. Again, I will be accused of painting all Salafis in one stroke. I'm not referring to every Salafi, there are differences among the Salafis. There are the quietist Salafis, there are Takfiri Salafis, there are the Salafis who only believe in political action and are not terrorists. This is true. So we have to specify which orientation among the Salafis and who are the scholars, who are the ideologues we're referring to. But we can do that. The evidence is all there. So rather than just say, well, don't blame the Salafis are a boogeyman, it is not true. Salafism is indeed a problem, and it's high time we talk about it in the open. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Oh, sorry, can I just say one more thing? To criticize Salafis is not to be Orientalist. Let's be very clear about that. Why? Who are the most vehement critics of the Salafis? First of all, Sulaiman ibn Abdul Wahab, the brother of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahab. The great scholar of Makkah, Zaini Dahlan, right? The great Sufi, Ahmad ibn Idris. And we can give so many examples. These have nothing to do with Orientalism, they have nothing to do with people not influenced by the West or by Western ideas. So if we really go into the Sunni scholarship, the genuine scholarship of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and this idea that Salafis or Wahhabis are Sunnis, again, this is a false idea. They are not Sunnis. By some historical accident and tragedy, the very people who were denied performing Hajj in Makkah by the authorities of Makkah, because they pronounced takfir on Muslims, so they were denied to attend Hajj, became the rulers of Makkah and Medina. An aberrant ideology now is the dominant ideology of that state that controls Makkah and Medina. But these people were never regarded as Sunnis by the Sunnis. Just because you follow the madhab of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, that doesn't define your status as a Sunni. What defines your status as Sunni is the Aqidah. Do you follow the Ash'ari or the Maturidi creed, for example? And they don't. So, when you talk about Sunni, Saudi Arabia and Iran, and the media puts it as Sunni Saudi Arabia versus Shia Iran, as if it is a global sectarian conflict, this is misleading, it's not true. Only thing is because, we're all afraid to say anything against Saudi Arabia, partly because we're afraid of the Hajj quotas being taken or reduced, right? I mean, even as individuals, right? If I want to go for Hajj, I'm afraid of what's going to happen. Am I going to be denied Hajj visa because of what I'm saying? So, but let's be honest about things. Forget about the West. Look at Islamic scholarship. Look at Sunni scholarship on Wahhabism and Salafism. You will find that most of what the Salafis say is against our tradition. Don't go to the West and don't make ad hominem arguments that because certain Western scholars say things against Salafism, they are from the West, therefore it is wrong. Very often what they are saying against Salafism is a reflection of what the tradition of Sunni scholarship has been saying.
Thank you. Can we have
just to answer one side, I think the award-winning journalist, Mr. Seymour Hirsch, did write a very important article explaining about your question, entitled "The Red Line and the Red Line." Actually, according to Mr. Seymour Hirsch, there was a tough war between the U.S. intelligence, between the Pentagon and CIA, Defense Department, on how to manage and handle Syrian issue with regard to the moderate rebels and ISIS. And in the article, Erdogan was mentioned as a willing participant in helping the logistic preparation for the rebels to travel to and fro from Turkey to Iraq and Syria. Why Erdogan became part of this conspiracy or scheme? Because he has something to bargain with regard to his, according to the article, his dealing with Iran. So this is a complex issue, and I think Malaysia has business interest with the Turkish government. The Kazana managed the airport, isn't it? To openly challenge or question the Turkish authority with regard to how they help our gullible youngsters to end up in Syria would be political suicide, I believe, in terms of diplomatic relation. So maybe there's a thought behind the scene, but who knows?
I want to take this issue of Salafism. I teach courses on contemporary Islamic developments and Islam in the West and how Islamic ideas, Muslim scholars have accepted Western ideas. And I know quite well that Muhammad Abdullah was known as a Salafi. So it depends on how you define the term. If you are talking about the Saudi rulers today, then no, they are not Salafi. Salafi literally means the early followers of Islam. And anybody is a Salafi. So I'm sorry for this. I will not take that. But of course, I'm extremely critical of what Saudis are doing today. I'm also very uncomfortable with close relationship between Saudis and Turkish government. But these are political realities. I cannot say anything about that. I really don't know about this passing of terrorists from Malaysia going to Syria and they're coming back and being arrested here. I have no knowledge about that. But one question that we have not addressed at all, and that is, was CIA informed, was CIA aware of the coup before July 15? My perception is that some people within the American administration did know, because F-16 was used, and also the American base in Turkey was extensively used. I don't think that without the knowledge of those Americans who are there, it could have been possible. So I just wanted to make that point. I don't think that I have anything else to say. Thank you.
Mr. Brother Junaid, last.
Yeah, just very quickly. I don't know if the person's even here, but our friend from Turkey. I just would concur with whatever the other panelists said, and I hope I made that clear in my comments as well. The excesses taking place that are targeting people innocently, all of this is unfortunate, and depending on what's taking place, often needs to be condemned and called out. But it's also important, and this is what I was trying to say in my comments, to almost see it in comparative context, right? I mean, if you can imagine right now, for example, in France, there's an ongoing state of emergency declared by the French state. Hundreds of people are in house arrest and so on and so forth, based on the terrorist incidences that have happened in France. Now you can imagine if France, or for that matter, the UK or the United States, if there was a type of coup that was planned the way that unfolded in Turkey, with F-16s flying, an assassination attempt on it, what type of measures these? And that's not to necessarily justify any of it. But I'm just saying that we also have to understand, kind of in comparative context, that this may not be, as I was saying, something unique to some Turkish despotism of Erdogan. But I totally concur with you. This is outrageous from and again, it's not that this may be all, knowing what's going on, but I mean, I knew there was an incident of a police officer being tortured, this type of thing. But as I think Professor Al-Ahsan said, that you cannot control what everyone does, but the fact remains that all of the main political parties, including at the time of the prevention of the coup, even some of the Kurds main parties, also supported this prevention of the coup. So I mean, now the way things are unfolding, we'll have to see where it goes, but it was very, very clear that the majority of the Turkish population and the majority of the political formations supported what was taking place against the coup. In terms of the question of the Kurds, it's an interesting one. Erdogan comes to power, AKP, it's incredible. I mean, they're being praised by everyone for making these outreach to the Kurds for the first time. So those that argue that now the Kurdish problem is, and how are they treating the Kurds, yeah, it's horrible, but it's been horrible for a very, very long time. And that's been the Turkish state and the Turkish military's behavior towards the Kurds. And in fact, for the first time, it was this Islamist government that was actually making overtures to the Kurds. And yeah, you're absolutely right that there has been rollback on that. In terms of Gulen and the issue of what he writes and what he says and the movement, it's about him being fundamentally for democracy, so on and so forth. I mean, that may or may not be true, but I just think that we have so many cases in the world. The country that I come from, Pakistan, there was a female prime minister elected twice, Benazir Bhutto, great kind of Democrat. Engaged in the type of plunder of the country, that you never heard of. Supported the Taliban emerge in Afghanistan under her rule. All sorts of things. In some ways, it's also a question of what, shouldn't we start to ask what this democracy thing is all about? What do we want from this democracy that we... So, he may be a Democrat, he may not be. I'm not sure if that's the most important question. What are we talking about in terms of the substance of this democracy that we want? finally, the last thing, or the last two things, on the question of, I mean, Professor Al-Ahsan